Okay, so we are finally arrived at our fourth session of the Lenten program on the Screwtape letters. So just a brief review. Screwtape, what this is a book that was written by C.S. Lewis, Clive Staples Lewis. He was in World War I in the trenches, and he came back World War I into the relative peace and calm of his home back in Ireland, and then on to Oxford, and began this process of transitioning from an atheist into a Christian. He pursued this. So remember the old saying, there are no atheists in foxholes. That came out of World War I, where people who went into the war without a faith or came out of the war with a faith or searching for a faith, because there was an exposure to the process of living that was beyond normal life, and that needed to be dealt with or made friends with or put into some category. So for a while, it made a big difference in France. France had become a nation of atheists and had gone into it saying, the famous God is dead, there is no God, it's just us. And there was a renaissance in France after World War I, turning back to the faith, back to the church. But of course, we can turn to the church, turn to God, and then easily talk ourselves out of it. And many, many people do that. Screwtape talks about that. That's going to be coming up. So what Screwtape Letters is a response in part to Lewis's process of finding faith. He was best friends, if I could say best friends, with J.R.R. Tolkien. They were both professors he was not a professor, excuse me. He was a tutor in the academic system in England. You're a professor or a tutor, and a tutor is, in our system, would be the same as a professor, but they don't teach in a class, in a gallery. They have office hours, and they get students all week long in their little office. And they are really the ones who teach. The professors come and teach seminar classes once a semester, twice a semester, that's about it. So Oxford never picked up C.S. Lewis as a professor, which was a scandal, because they did give him, he came to a place where he was so popular that they were giving him galleries to teach in. And even though he was getting more students and more people than anybody, they never made him a professor. And he was picked up by Cambridge. Cambridge offered him, in fact, they made a seat for him and a chair for him and put him in charge in his chair in Cambridge. So an odd sort of, I don't think it's a coincidence, he taught at Magdalen College at Oxford and then went on to teach at Magdalen College at Cambridge. So same name, interesting. Screwtape Letters, I say, is a reflection of the process that Lewis went through and the observable process that Lewis entered into with students and with others whom he was counseling, and saw that these forces were at work within him as he lived his life and responded to the issues of faith and the process of learning faith and gaining faith. So today's Screwtape Letter, the fourth one, is primarily, not entirely, but partly about prayer. So as we go through these, it's really, really important to listen to the satirical explanation of what's going on by Screwtape, but then let yourself be embarrassed by what you read or what you hear read and say, dang, I do that. Because that is exactly what Lewis is trying to get at. Telling and showing everybody that your experience is not unique. We like to make ourselves very unique. No one ever suffered as I did. No one ever had the problems like I did. Well, that's completely bunk. It's complete. We do that because then we can suffer and feel sort of august and hallowed because of our suffering and our problems and our pain. And this is another reason this keeps us away from Christ. I've actually known people that have, in their suffering, rejected healing because their suffering is, in their mind, what made them special. And if they allowed themselves to be healed, they would no longer be special, they'd be just like everybody else. You may have met people like this in your life. In fact, I'm willing to bet you have. They are people who are, when you talk to them, that's all their life is about. They want to tell you about it, they want to show you it, and they want to keep doing it, keep doing it. And once they move from one area of suffering and it's over, suddenly they have a new one, and it goes on. So this is a malady of being human. We all do it to a certain extent. In prayer, it comes out very robustly, especially if our prayers are new. We're starting a new prayer practice. We were talking in the icon class, which is all about prayers, praying with icons. And one of the things we talked about was that beginning the process of praying with icons can be a very difficult process, because suddenly I'm thinking about all these things that I don't usually think about, and it can backlash right onto us as we do it. So this is the focus of this letter, number 4. Enjoy, don't run away, engage. I did share with the class once, I think it was the first week I was there, that I've actually had a very sad case where a person who took this book study not only left the class, but left the church completely. Left the area, left the church, and never went back to church again, because she could not look at, when I got a hold of her, she said, I can't stand this, I hate it, I'm sorry, I took it, it's terrible, it's awful, it's all about me. And I said, yeah, this is for you, because it's a happy ending story. It comes out, and this is exactly why you're here. Nobody else needs to be here, just you. And she left the church, she left the area, and I caught up with her later, and she's never, as far as I know, ever gone back to church. It was too close, it was too real. So very sad, because you do the same thing listening to what Jesus says. Jesus can tell you stuff in the gospel and run away. I think that's probably why so many people listen to the gospel and then they just ignore it, or they change it and make it say something else, because it's speaking too closely to home and they can't deal with it, so you have to clean it up. So we're going to hit number 4. Here you go, guys. And if you all there can't hear it, please let me know. Speak up. You've got a pen. I encourage you to write on your papers as we go.
The big tall ones.
Letter 4. My dear Wormwood, the amateurish suggestions in your last letter warn me that it is high time for me to write to you fully on the painful subject of prayer. You might have spared the comment that my advice about his prayers for his mother proved singularly unfortunate. That is not the sort of thing that a nephew should write to his uncle, nor a junior tempter to the under-secretary of a department. It also reveals an unpleasant desire to shift responsibility. You must learn to pay for your own blunders. The best thing, where it is possible, is to keep the patient from the serious intention of praying altogether. When the patient is an adult recently converted to the enemy's party, like your man, this is best done by encouraging him to remember, or to think he remembers, the parrot-like nature of his prayers in childhood. In reaction against that, he may be persuaded to aim at something entirely spontaneous, inward, informal, and unregularized. And what this will actually mean to a beginner will be an effort to produce in himself a vaguely devotional mood in which real concentration of will and intelligence have no part. One of their poets, Coleridge, has recorded that he did not pray with moving lips and bended knees, but merely composed his spirit to love and indulged a sense of supplication. That is exactly the sort of prayer we want. And since it bears a superficial resemblance to the prayer of silence, as practiced by those who are very far advanced in the enemy's service, clever and lazy patients can be taken in by it for quite a long time. At the very least, they can be persuaded that the bodily position makes no difference to their prayers, for they constantly forget what you must always remember, that they are animals, and that whatever their bodies do affects their souls. It is funny how mortals always picture us as putting things into their minds. In reality, our best work is done by keeping things out. If this fails, you must fall back on a subtler misdirection of his intention. Whenever they are attending to the enemy himself, we are defeated, but there are ways of preventing them from doing so. The simplest is to turn their gaze away from him towards themselves. Keep them watching their own minds and trying to produce feelings there by the action of their own wills. When they meant to ask him for charity, let them instead start trying to manufacture charitable feelings for themselves and not notice that this is what they're doing. When they meant to pray for courage, let them really be trying to feel brave. When they say they are praying for forgiveness, let them be trying to feel forgiven. Teach them to estimate the value of each prayer by their success in producing the desired feeling, and never let them suspect how much success or failure of that kind depends on whether they are well or ill, fresh or tired at the moment. But of course, the enemy will not meantime be idle. Whenever there is prayer, there is danger of his own immediate action. He is cynically indifferent to the dignity of his position and ours as pure spirits. And to human beings on their knees, he pours out self-knowledge in a quite shameless fashion. But even if he defeats your first attempt at misdirection, we have a subtler weapon. The humans do not start from that direct perception of him, which we unhappily cannot avoid. They have never known that ghastly luminosity, that stabbing and searing glare which makes the background of permanent pain to our lives. If you look into your patient's mind when he is praying, you will not find that. If you examine the object to which he is attending, you will find that it is a composite object containing many quite ridiculous ingredients. There will be images derived from pictures of the enemy, as he appeared during the discreditable episode known as the Incarnation. There will be vaguer, perhaps quite savage and puerile images associated with the other two persons. There will even be some of his own reverence and of bodily sensations accompanying it, objectified and attributed to the object revered. I have known cases where what the patient called his God was actually located up and to the left at the corner of the bedroom ceiling, or inside his own head, or in a crucifix on the wall. But whatever the nature of the composite object, you must keep him praying to it, to the thing he has made, not to the person who has made him. You may even encourage him to attach great importance to the correction and improvement of his composite object, and to keeping it steadily before his imagination during the whole prayer. For if he comes to make the distinction, if he consciously directs his prayers, not to what I think thou art, but to what thou knowest thyself to be, our situation is, for the moment, desperate. Once all his thoughts and images have been flung aside, or, if retained with a full recognition of their merely subjective nature, and the man trusts himself to the completely real, external, invisible presence, there with him in the room and never knowable by him as he is known by it, why, then it is that the incalculable may occur. In avoiding this situation, this real nakedness of the soul in prayer, you will be helped by the fact that the humans themselves do not desire it as much as they suppose. There's such a thing as getting more than they bargain for. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
And that goes fast. So much here. So before we start, before I have questions, what did anybody have anything that they have heard that they want to call out? Something entertaining.
What I wonder is that I don't think he ever addresses it in the book. The forms of, the prayers of evil, the forms of prayer that You know, we don't make them up, we read them from the book. Are they yet another objectified object of whatever? Or,
The form prayers?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because you're not praying from your own.
Right. He actually looked at that in the second paragraph on your sheet, probably half an inch below center. Paragraph begins the best thing. And then there's a sentence that comes down, I guess it's the next sentence, says, in reaction against that, he may be persuaded to aim at something entirely spontaneous, inward, formal, and unregularized. What this will actually mean to the beginner will be an effort to produce himself a vaguely devotional mood, which real concentration of will and intelligence have no part. So remember, he's an Anglican. He became an Anglican after he was converted, so he is using the prayer book. And the prayers in the prayer book are rote. So this is one of the criticisms of other churches, a lot of the Protestant churches and the free churches, the four square churches, is that we have these prayers we read out of the book. But what Lewis is saying is that if I am a new Christian and I don't know how to pray and I don't have this genuine sense of prayer, these prayers, I read this prayer and we've all done this. We've read a prayer somewhere and we said, I like that prayer. I'm going to keep that prayer, or maybe even copy that prayer, have that prayer in your mind or have it at home on the shelf. So that prayer is saying that's what you want to pray, but you just haven't known how to pray it. So
They are beautifully written. And the other thing is, I can't remember if it's the beginning or the end. There's this, fine print italic thing of what we did here was, prayed for the world, prayed for the, and so there's your
teaching
outline.
Yep.
And then you look, why, by gum, there it is. Every
Yes.
time they start with the same.
Yep. So if you're in the church and you do that every day, every week, every month, every year, then eventually when it comes time that you're asked to say a prayer, you might say in a spontaneous prayer kind of out of that without even thinking about it, because it's what you have been praying and not have any problem doing it. So Lewis is saying if somebody starts off with a prayer, I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen comedies where what is it? Whoopi Goldberg, nuns.
Oh yeah,
Sister Act.
Sister Act. Do you remember that when she is
Oh,
introduced
yeah.
to the sisters and they think she's a nun before they find out, and they ask her when she comes to the dinner table to pray? And she sits down and she's like, instead of just saying, God, thank you for this food, this wonderful day, she decides she has to be flowery. And she starts saying the Pledge of Allegiance and all this stuff, throwing all these things in, and people are looking at her all sideways. So Lewis is saying the same thing. If we are trying to create a prayer and we're not familiar with being a prayerful person, the focus that we have will not be on the expression of the prayer, but on my praying it. So if you look in the prayer book in the back at the prayers, the collects, they're titled for those in need, for those who are sick, for those who are troubled, for those they're there. So if if I'm sick, I can go in the prayer book and look it up and pray for myself as a sick person or pray for somebody else. So unregularized is the opposite of what he's talking about. We should have this as a rote process. Okay, anybody else? I'm gonna jump around a little bit. I absolutely love the phrase, they've never known the ghastly luminosity, that stabbing and searing glare which makes the background of our permanent pain of our lives. I love the idea that the presence of the divine, of God, of grace, of mercy, of love, of peace and filial relationship is a horror and a pain. And I don't want that. And I'd say I love it because there is this line that he says at the very end, there is such a thing as getting more than they bargained for. I knew a woman who, in marriage counseling, a woman who's a church, not this church member, was a church member, was in Curcio, was into spiritual renewal, all sorts of stuff, who wound up leaving her husband and her family and taking on a very scandalous life because she said in counseling, admitted that she recognized who God was, and that she realized that if she kept going the way she was going, then her whole life was going to be curtailed, and she wasn't going to be allowed to do the things that she wanted to do. And so that God was this jailer who was going to lock her down and lock her up. And so instead of trying to deal with that and learn that that's completely wrong, she just exploded. She wouldn't listen to anybody anymore. In fact, I think it was the last day of counseling for her. She was in several different counseling groups. And she left her husband and left her family and went way off the deep end. So this is they get more than they bargained for. People see that they're turning to God because they want God to really help them. But when they start to realize what God is going to do to help them, they may see it and experience it as restriction and stealing their liberties and taking away their livelihood, and they rebel. But by the way, this is in fact part of what the wardrobe is about. The wardrobe, the kids in Narnia, right? They've left this world, and when they've left this world, they go into this confined, small, dark, seemingly dead end, seemingly scary. They did this a great job in one of the movies. The kids are in there like, they're banging around for all these clothes. But at the last, when they pushed through it, it wasn't scary anymore. In fact, it was so unbelievable. It opened up into a whole new land. It was beautiful. It was clean. It was pristine. There was no pollution. It was all fantastic. And all the most fantastic possibilities of life were present there. So that is a metaphor in Narnia of moving spiritually from the life that we know through the perceived restriction of the life that God would offer, but we can't understand, so we fear it, and then achieving the reality of God's gift, which is to open everything up in a brave new way. What the people don't realize, and what this woman that left counseling, I tried to tell her, is that she was afraid of the God of her own fear. But if she just kept going, by the time she got through that wardrobe, she would realize how silly that fear was and how wonderful it was to be on the other side. But she couldn't overcome that. She couldn't do it. So Screwtape here is saying this is a good thing. Let this person get everything they think they want, and they're going to turn right around and run screaming from their own. So it's another subtle way of giving what you want, but it's really too much. All right, what else? Who else? Anything?
Well, I liked this part where it says, it's funny how mortals always picture us as putting things into their minds. In reality, our best work is done by keeping things out.
Right. Very much so. Yep. Okay, why do you think here in the first paragraph, let's see, that's just a review of Screwtape in his in letter 3. In paragraph 3, it says the best thing where it's possible is to keep the patient from serious intention of praying altogether. So that's why I just don't want to pray, but that's not going to happen. And then this whole little lineage that he has here about taking him back in time. Encourage him to remember or think he remembers, because it's really just in creation that he's doing in the moment. The parrot-like nature of his prayers in childhood. Mom and dad tell you to pray for your brother, pray for your sister, or that's another one. I love the meal prayers. God is great, God is good, and we thank you for our food, and the daily bread, and the nighttime prayers. Although I still say the nighttime prayers that my mom taught me. I have all of them, and I say them all. They mean a lot more to me now than they did when I was a child. I remember my brother throwing a fit at night when my mom would come in and say it's prayer time because he didn't want to pray. Then he would pray, and it would be like, You can go back in time and clean that up. I could clean it up and say, I always knew that was special to pray. My mom. That's a lie. That's just me saying it because I'm an adult now. I may actually believe it. I'm not lying on purpose, not putting it on. But I've cleaned up the past. We have a tendency to do that. We clean up and then make ourselves better look. We look better in the past than we actually did. In reaction against that, he may be persuaded to aim for something entirely spontaneous, and that's where we repair Lee. And then this other thing, effort to produce himself a vaguely devotional mood in which real concentration and real intelligence will have no part. This is where he's moving, which is brilliant. I'm not saying I'm brilliant, but I did just write about this in Creator Calling, unrelated to this, last week, about the difference between spiritual development and maturity and emotional awareness of a spiritual desire. And these are very different things. One will get you where you want to go, and one will get you nowhere at all. And this little bit by Coleridge has recorded that he did not pray with moving lips and bended knee, but merely composed his spirit to love and indulge a sense of supplication. So I know you guys want to know where that came from. Samuel Taylor Coleridge lived from 1772 to 1798. He was a poet. He was a writer. He was a friend of Wordsworth. If you know the poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, it's a brilliant poem. Now that's Coleridge. If you don't know the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, you should just read it after this on your way home. It's great. He was a big proponent of German idealist philosophy and helped to move it forward within the context of the world reflection on philosophical norms. He also wrote in 1803 a very famous poem, well received in England, called The Pains of Sleep. It's in Old English, but you're going to get it anyway. Ere on my bed my limbs I lay, it hath not been my use to pray with moving lips or bended knees, but silently by slow degrees. My spirit I to love compose, in humble trust mine eyelids close, with reverential resignation, no wish conceived, no thought expressed, only a sense of supplication. A sense o'er all my soul impressed, that I am weak, yet not unblessed, since in me, round me, everywhere, eternal strength and wisdom are. But yesternight I prayed aloud in anguish and in agony. So it has good parts to it. It has these good little sections to it. But what Lewis is talking about is the overall purpose of this is exactly what Coleridge is saying. Coleridge is rating the value of his prayer by his own emotional froth, by how much he comes to it. So last night his prayers were totally effective because he was in agony and anguish. And Lewis is saying this is the pitfall of prayer. If we are, and I just absolutely find the list here is fantastic. Keep them watching their own minds and trying to produce feelings by their actions. When they want to ask for charity, let them feel charitable. When they want to be courageous, let them feel brave. When they want to feel forgiven, let them pray for forgiveness, let them feel forgiven. This sense that I have achieved the proper prayer with the proper response from God because I feel this way does not work. It really doesn't work. This is why, and you may have had this, you may have this in your life. You may have something in your life where you continue to pray for forgiveness for the same thing over and over again. Because you're looking for the feeling of being forgiven. And you can't forgive yourself, or you can't accept that God has forgiven you until you feel forgiven. But the reality, I've said this before, the reality is it's a low-level heresy, right? When we say that I with the reality of my life and the truth of my soul, bear myself to God and say, forgive me, and then tomorrow I do it again. Because what I'm saying is that God is not doing it. That I have genuinely and with truth, with reality, have asked God for forgiveness, but I just don't believe God can do it. Can't do it. Because I didn't feel forgiven, which is not God. That's me. So in the scripture, when Jesus talks about knowing him, you know someone in your own life that if you did something wrong, Kathy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. And Kathy says, it's okay, Bill, because you've done this before. It's okay, Bill. I know it's fine. I'm not going to think anymore about it because I know Kathy. Kathy forgives me. I'm not going to question that. I know her. If she doesn't forgive me, I'm sure she'll throw something at me or kick me or something. So if she says, I forgive you, I'm going to walk away and say, I'm forgiven. I trust her because I know her. So when we turn to God for forgiveness and then turn to God for forgiveness and turn to God for forgiveness, we are really saying, I don't really know God. I really don't know Christ. I'm really not accepting this from Christ. Remember again, I'm unforgivable. So I'm living within the context of my, we all do this, by the way, don't feel too bad. But it's just, it's wonderful to see it in print because it takes away the special sting of it to me. All right, what about another one? What does Screwtape say not to let the patient do? The converse of this. Keep them in an emotional mood, right? Keep them emotional. What do we don't want the patient to do with the enemy?
To perceive it, let them get that direct perception of them.
Yes. And how do we do that? How do we get a direct perception of God? Or how about this one? This is easier. What can keep us from a direct perception of God? Even when we're...
Ourselves.
What?
Ourselves.
Ourselves. If I'm focused all on me and my thing, I can't receive God's presence. Can't do it. Again, I'll use icons. We're talking about creating an icon corner, an icon wall in our house that you use as an altar, and use the icons as the Orthodox teach us to be a window into the divine so that it can focus my mind to God. But what if I'm all concerned about how I arrange them on the wall, or which wall to put them on, or if there's a doily down, or if there's a candle there, or if I have incense, and then I put them up and I realize, oh no, I only have 3 icons and I feel like I should have 5. I'm never going to have an effective prayer moment because I'm not connecting with God at all. I'm all about me and the thing that I'm doing and how I'm doing it and what's happening and blah, blah, blah. And now it's over. It's time. I've spent a half an hour doing this, and that's the allotment I've given to prayer. So yeah, it's the direct perception of God, which means I have to get out of myself. Okay, what about this great thing about a body position? Where is that?
Well, I do think you have to have, it's like, I got a bone spur on my knee, I don't kneel.
Yes,
There's no point in kneeling.
right.
I mean, I don't cut my wrist either, same deal.
Yes,
But there is a thing, it's like, yeah, I have to have my corner, my spot,
yes.
my window, my, and when everything is organized, then I can forget all of.
Right, it goes away because you've got everything in order. I think that's fine. I think you would say that's fine too. But it has that limit that says, okay, when I'm at home, this is the routine I go through. But what if I say, I realize I can't pray anywhere else in the whole wide world? The only place where I really can pray is when I get home and go through my routine. So really, the place where I have made my routine has become the idol. I can't access God in this place because I'm not at home in my special place. Well, that means God's only at home in my special place.
Yeah, no, it has to be, I get me, and so I'm invisible. I
Yeah.
can't do it in traffic. But stop signs.
Yeah, yeah. This is the you are mentioning the correct way, the way Screwtape would never want to speak about it. What he's saying is that this place where he said, I know people who've had got their God is actually in the upper right hand corner of their bedroom. Think about laying on your bed at night and looking up while you pray, and you find out that's the only place I can pray. When I go to pray, I pray every night in my bed before I sleep, staring up at that ceiling, by the window, by the light of the window, with that little shaft. But I can't pray anywhere else. So really, I've imbued that place or that position with God, and God is anywhere else for me. So it's a brilliant thing. But this other thing here, at the very least, you can be persuaded the bodily position makes no difference to their prayers, but they constantly forget what we must remember, that they are animals, and whatever their bodies do affects their soul. We know this. We know this, but we tend to ignore it. And the way that we ignore it when we were youths, was that we went to places where we shouldn't have been. We went to parties and we went to do things, and when we got there, we said, I'm not gonna do that. And then our friend said, oh, just hear one. And then here's just two, and then pretty soon we're trashed, thrown up out the door on the way home. Why? Because our mind and our will followed our body. Our body went there, our body stayed there, the influences of the people there affected us, and we gave into it. And it happens all the time. I don't know about you, but I frequently at home and can be quoted saying, I can't sit down right now. Because I know what's gonna happen. If I'm in the middle of doing something and I'm working, if I take 20 more minutes, I will get it done. But if I sit down, I'm gonna flip on the TV set. I'm gonna pick up a book and fumble through it. I'm gonna put my head back and fall asleep. And then I'm gonna put off the thing I was supposed to finish till tomorrow, which means next Saturday. So we go where our bodies go, and we will justify what we do or don't do based on our bodily position, which is there or not there. And he's saying they don't realize this, and I don't think we do. I think it's a hard lesson to learn. We know we need to stop. I'm tired, but not really. We could get done. Just 20 more minutes. We could be done. All right, almost done here. Let's see. Biblical reference. We can go through a whole bunch of those. What was the incalculable situation that he says? Where it's the end.
Where is it?
It's at the very end, it's about the fifth line to the very end. It's the second to last full sentence. It starts in the about a third of the way up the paragraph. Once all his thoughts and images have been flung aside or retained with a full recognition of a merely subjective nature, the man trusts himself to completely real, external, invisible presence. Then there with him in the room, and never knowable by him as he is known by it. By then the incalculable may occur.
Incalculable meaning he sees God?
Yes.
Okay.
The awareness of the true presence. So what Screwtape unwittingly has done here, or maybe wittingly for us, is outlined everything before that. That whole sentence is the recipe to bring about the incalculable in our life. Right? All my thoughts and images are flung aside. And if I think of anything, it's the full recognition of the purely subjective nature, and trust myself completely to the real, external, invisible presence, there with me in the room, knowable by him as he is known by it, as I am known by it. So I am aware of the presence of God now, not of the things that I brought to this place that'll help me find God, icons. And because I am now have denuded the external world around me from these distractions, I am now open to actually commune with God. And when that happens, it's the incalculable, because now I can have the actual change of my life. I can actually really understand God and make a difference in who I am. So it's the most dangerous. This is the most dangerous moment for Screwtape. And then he ends it by saying, in avoiding this situation, this real nakedness of soul, you'll be helped by the fact that humans themselves don't desire as much as they suppose, and that's the back end of it. I get down, I get really close to meeting God. Oh, I'm hungry because I don't know what's going to happen. I had a friend of mine growing up. I've known him for years, and I've seen him several years since I became a priest, who just flat out told me that to really be devoted to God, you have to give up all your money and all your stuff, and you have to, you just can't be the person you want to be.
That always seems to be like, the kid who doesn't want to go to kindergarten because it's too hard to go to college. Today that's not your job.
Right.
Maybe it will be someday, but it might not ever be.
Right.
Just like when you get to college, it's not going to be nearly as hard as trying to figure out reading in first grade. That's really,
Right.
After that, it's all downhill.
And we do it all along. I had a conversation with Will at the dinner table 2 days ago. Because he's like big on chemistry and all this other stuff. And I said, is this all fun for you? Is it other moments where it's not fun? He goes, oh, yeah, and stuff like that. And I said, I wanted to make sure. I said, I just want to make sure you understand this. When you move from this place of what you have to do to the place beyond this where you've got the basics down, the stuff that you're fighting hard to learn right now, and you are loving it, it's not going to be work anymore. It's going to be the joyful thing. It's going to be where you're running. You're not going to want to put the book down. You're going to want more time in the day so you can do more of it. But you can't see that now. Right now, it's just working. Later on, it'll be so much greatness. So what Screwtape says is don't keep them in that place, kindergarten or worrying about college. Keep us thinking about, oh my gosh, if it's always like this, I'm not going to do it. It's not always going to be like this. That's just a silly thing to
I was
say.
gonna say, what else is always like this?
Yes, it's nothing. Everything changes. That's great. Thank you. Brilliant. This truncated worldview that says if it's always like this, I'm not going to do it. And Carolee said it's never always like this. It's for some reason we get into this place where I can say with a straight face, with a reality, that I believe it's always going to be like this, so I quit. But it's ridiculous. It's right up Screwtape. That's Screwtape all over the place, convincing, always saying, yes, that's right. That's right. It's always going to be like this. Run away, quick.
Well, the minute you have a week of always like this, you're so bored you can't stand it.
Yep. All right, so you've effectively graduated the fourth letter of Screwtape. It's been wonderful to go through this. Remember now, if you didn't know this before, that we're going to pick up Screwtape letters in the Rector's Bible study. That'll be going on Wednesday nights, interchangeably with the Chosen. We're going to work on that as well. So if you want to keep going with Screwtape, we're going to have the same format. We're just going to do it on Zoom, where we have read by John Cleese, and then have this time to reflect on it and go over it as we move forward. So,
What are we doing Sunday morning?
well, we're going to finish up with the icons, and the next set is what's coming after, which will be 2 weeks or 3 weeks after Easter, and we're still in the process of talking about that. So, since we have Chosen is on doc, Chosen season 3, because we've done line 2, line 3. I'm not watching it. So there was an idea to say do a Screwtape letters on Wednesday, do the Chosen on Sunday morning, and have the Chosen in here and have that time to spend together doing it that way. So we just have to have more talks about it. We'll go from there. All right, let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for your love and for your presence and for your companionship along the way. We thank you for the gifts that you shower us with, all of the beauty and the wonder of your creation and the opportunities that you have given us to grow in our knowledge and love of you and service of one another. I ask you to watch over us this day, keep us safe as we travel and part company. Give us a peaceful day and a peaceful rest tonight, that we might begin a new day energized in your love. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys, thank you much. Great to be with you. Sorry again for keeping you languishing in purgatory there for a while.
See y'all later.
I'm
Bye.
glad we stuck it out.
Have a good week.
Good week, Mom.
You too.
Bye, Sharon, everybody else.
Bye-bye.
All right.
See y'all.